I have got a black follower, Aaron Stewart, who just followed me, and he nailed it. I think it's all about accountability. It has nothing to do with what the FBI is doing or the government or anybody else. It's all about accountability. People have to take personal accountability for their own actions. You can't have somebody who's a black guy having babies and then just not supporting that baby. You can't have them out in the street shooting people, killing people without fear of the law. And if you ask what black people, why they think they are owed reparations, how well were they doing before they came to the United States? Most black people, the vast majority of them, before they came here as slaves, they came from Nigeria. Well, how's Nigeria doing? How's Tanzania doing? How's Congo doing? Right now, Nigeria is ranked #1 over in Africa as far as their GDP is concerned. But how are they doing? They're ranked, according to this, what I'm looking at is statistic, they're ranked, Nigeria is 136th out of 163 countries in the 2020 Social Progress Index. And according to the Global Poverty Report, and this is despite their #1 GDP in Africa, the Global Poverty Report reports that Nigeria is the third most country impacted by terrorism, according to the 2020 Global Terrorism Index. So just because you have a GDP, a high GDP, it's all relative. Right behind them is Egypt, and then ranked third is South Africa. Egyptians aren't black. South African is black, but it was a lot of them are German and Dutch, white people, and look how they're being treated. So you ask these black people how Nigeria is doing and how Africa in general is doing, and most of them probably don't even realize that they're not doing that well. Look at Haiti. How's Haiti doing? They're black. So don't tell me as a white person who's been here since before the Civil War, ancestry-wise, that I owe you a penny. If you think you're going to get it, you're not. There's no white people in the United States who are going to put up with it. You're not going to get a fucking dime. Pardon my French. Americans are not going to pay reparations to blacks ever.
That is a very interesting opinion. And
is it my turn?
We have Mr. Alshamiri, I believe.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, Miss Alshamiri. I'll just be real quick. Mike, I want you to stay right here in this room when I go, because I got some. I'm not gonna speak French, but I got some language for your ass.
Should I start?
Yeah, just go ahead, please.
Okay. I'm going to speak about this subject from a different perspective. I am not Black American or African American. I'm not white. I come from the Middle East. I came to this country when I was 14 years old. I grew up here. I went to college. I married an Italian Catholic woman. Yes, racism do exist. However, I don't think the United States of America today is a racist country, or there is systematic racism in this country based on laws, based on equal opportunity, based on a lot of different factors. I think, everybody is not looking at the big picture. The big picture is this. Instead of us, the people, uniting against the elites of both parties, we are being played in a big way. The fact is, we have to label ourselves as Arab American, African American, white American, Asian American, is dividing us from looking at the big picture. The big picture is this: the elites are making money. The elites, political and corporate elites, are doing very fine. You know, they're black, white, Asian. They live in a very good zip codes, while the rest of us struggle, while the rest of us fighting one another. This is, you know, I've been living here almost for 20 something years. I did very fine in this great country. I love, it's my first home. I grew up here. You know, America is not perfect, you know, but historically speaking, even during, you know, slavery times, who owned the slaves are 1% of the whites. So it always was the elites who controlled the narrative. I think white supremacy, Black Lives Matter, all this stuff is very, it's made just to divide the society and divide the people from one another. I think we all could coexist and change the status quo in this country. It's still the greatest country in the world. There is nothing compared to the United States of America. There is no constitution in the world compared to the U.S. Constitution. Our rights in this country is given by the Creator, is not given by the government. We all should understand that and work with one another to change the status quo and hold our government accountable to us. $40 billion just disappeared, sent to the Ukraine and disappeared, while people in Chicago need money, while people in bad zip codes need money, while our kids needs money. This is my perspective. Thank you.
So before believe it's Marcel goes, I just want to state that, you know, this aspect of reparations is highly complicated, and you know, I don't back what Mike said there. I think that there's an issue that, you know, the U.S. Constitution prohibits a taxation on a person by the basis of their skin color. So if you're going to get reparations in one direction, you can't have it, you know, a tax on white people or Asian people to pay for black people.
Okay.
And the other side of this, but just let me finish, and I'll give you this platform. You can continue and give your reaction. But the other side of this coin is there's this other aspect where our federal government, when they quote unquote pay people reparations, they actually make it a national debt, and then we all, including black people, end up paying the tax on that. So it's really just a temporary loan. And it was very much how these stimulus checks were done, because now we're paying for it in inflation. You know, it is that kind of wicked. But anyway, go ahead, Marcel.
So thank y'all for having me. I figured Mike was going to run off because that's usually what anti-black bigots do when they know they're about to get checked. So first of all, I want to clear up a huge misconception. Please do. I want to clear up a huge misconception. First of all, thank you for having me up here. I want to say that reparations is not a tax on any living U.S. citizen. It is not. That is a lie. First of all, I doubt Mike can even afford a damn dollar meal off the McDonald's menu. Okay, so no one's looking to Mike to pay us reparations. The truth of the matter is the federal government was enriched by the labor of my ancestors who were enslaved in this here land. He talks about he's been here since the Civil War. My family's been here since before the Revolutionary War, going back in records. So the reason his ancestors, the Irish, came here is because of the work that my ancestors did in building the infrastructure of this nature. If you do your research before the arrival of people that were captured from the African continent, some people say black people were here, indigenous, whatever. I'm not getting into that conversation. The 13 colonies were largely failing. As a matter of fact, some people were starting to go back. In the case of South Carolina, once the black people came and settled on the coast of South Carolina and they started growing rice, That was the first source of significant wealth for the 13 colonies and then for the U.S. Army. You can even do the research on the Revolutionary War. What was it that the Union Army was wearing? They were clothing themselves with indigo that was created and dyed by Black Americans, okay? The infrastructure that was built for this country was done by Black Americans. And I know I forgot your name, and I don't want to mispronounce it. He mentioned that it was the elite who were slaveholders. That may have been true, but that being said, it wasn't just the elite that was fighting to keep slavery. The Confederacy wasn't just that 1% of enslaved slave-holding people. A whole bunch of white people owned slavery themselves, but they definitely agreed with it to the point they were willing to die to fight to try to maintain it. I also want to bring up the fact, I find it really strange that we talk about how reparations will be an attack against white people. The truth of the matter is, reparations is something that America has been doing since before the 1800s. They've done it for several Native American tribes. They did it for the Japanese Americans. We even did it for the Holocaust survivors, even though the only role we played in the Holocaust was stopping the Nazis. My great-grandfather is still very much alive. He's in his late 90s. He's moved from South Carolina, lives in New York City. He is a World War II vet. Guess what happened when he returned from fighting the Nazis overseas? He came back to the United States of America, and guess what he was able to experience? He saw his white veterans get trillions of dollars from the GI Bill, what's sometimes called the Readjustment Act. They used that to buy homes, to open businesses, to get pensions, to go to college, to get health care. Guess what my great-grandfather got? Not a damn penny. So when his white veterans had their children, they were able to pass down land, housing, businesses, and other assets to them. Guess what he was able to give to my grandmother, his daughter? Nothing but the same poverty in which he had been born in. Let's go back further than that. Let's go to the 1860s when Abraham Lincoln signed the Homestead Act. Guess what the Homestead Act did? It gave away 10% of the entire nation of the United States of America, hundreds of millions of acres, given to 98% of whom were white Americans. To this day, 48 to 60 million white American families can trace their wealth back to the Homestead Act. And from where does most wealth come in the United States of America? It comes from land. That being said, Black Americans coming out of slavery without a penny being given to us being functionally illiterate, us having to deal with extreme anti-Black violence. Matter of fact, one study says that the Black population decreased by 25% after slavery ended because there was no incentive to protect us. We still were able to build over 50 Black Wall Streets. We still were able to amass between 16 to 19 million acres of property. And that's with lynching being the number one cause of lynching was land theft. We were still able to achieve those things. But what happened? Our Black Wall Streets were burned to the ground and our land was stolen. Let's not even talk about redlining. Let's not even talk about Jim Crow. All the while, this same government was giving away hundreds of millions of acres of land to white Americans, was investing in the education, home ownership of white Americans, the education of white Americans, the health care of white Americans, while denying it to Black Americans. Reparation is not a taxation on white Americans. It is the federal government repairing the damage they have done to Black Americans. And I imagine some people in this room consider themselves Republicans. I always find it a great hypocrisy for any Republican to say that they're the party of Abraham Lincoln. What was the last thing Abraham Lincoln was doing before he was killed? It was reparations. He signed Special Field Order 15. I'm Gullah Geechee. I live right here in the area where General Sherman met with the 20 Black pastors and Special Field Order 15 was created. I have land from Special Field Order 15. It's heirs property, so I get no value from it. So if you're going to be the party of Abraham Lincoln, you need to do what even Abraham Lincoln recognized needed to be done. He recognized that simply ending chattel slavery was not enough. He recognized that they needed, let me turn this damn phone on. Give me 1 second. He recognized that they need to be repaired from the damage that had been inflicted upon them during chattel slavery. Had America paid reparations then, we would be not in the predicament in which we are now. I hate when people say, well, no one who's a slave is still alive. Well, I say to any white person who says that, give up any inheritance you may have gotten. Did you inherit land?
I'm black.
Did you? Okay, yeah. Excuse me. I let you speak. Now I'm going to speak. Okay. I say to any white person or any black person to make you feel included, I say to any white person or any black person who's ever inherited anything, whether it was money, whether it was land, whether it was businesses, whether it was stocks, bonds, give that up because you didn't do the work for that. Your parents did, your grandparents did, your great-grandparents did. If we're going to play that whole you didn't do the work so you don't deserve to get paid for a game, that means none of us should be inheriting anything. That means from the moment we're born in this country, all of us should start from scratch. How's that? I also want to call out Mike. He has the audacity to talk about the African continent. Most African countries, and by no means am I a Pan-African, but most African countries are 50 to 60 years old. That is how some countries got independence when I was a kid. South Africa, apartheid ended in South Africa when I was in like 3rd or 4th grade. Meanwhile, let's look at what's happening in Europe right now. Once again, Europeans are slaughtering the hell out of each other, as they did with World War I, as they did with World War II, as they did during the Crusades, as they did during the feudal wars. Europeans have mastered the art of slaughtering one another. But the difference is when World War I, which was called the Great War, occurred, and then World War II happened, they dragged everyone else into their tribal wars. They killed each other on a level the world had never seen. Guess who stepped in and had to save Europe, and not only saved them, but had to repair them? Black Americans did, fighting a part of the American army. After World War II, guess what the United States of America did? They invested what is now trillions of dollars in Europe in plans called the Marshall Plan. Not just Europe, but also in East Asia. If it wasn't for the Marshall Plan, that was taken from the wealth of America, wealth that would not exist if not for Black Americans, Europe would still be the shithole that it was. We built Europe up, while at the same time not investing a penny in the Black American soldiers who went over to Europe to stop the Nazis. We are doing the same thing right now as we speak with Ukrainians. I take offense as well, Monica, I think I heard you say this, or someone, I think the lady who was on with you said it. I take offense as well to this nation sending trillions of dollars to Ukraine while you have Americans here who are struggling to get the bare necessities, while you have Americans who are homeless. Black Americans, 15 to 20% of the population, over 55% of the homeless, but they're putting trillions in Ukraine. But my question is to everyone in the space, what would Ukraine look like if America wasn't buffering them up right now? They will look the same way that Germany and Italy looked before America fixed them up and repaired them. America, the first thing the American army did at the end of World War II, before we started paying reparations to the Holocaust, before we started pouring in trillions of dollars to Israel, do y'all know the first thing the American army did? I know, because my great-grandfather was there. They made the Nazis, the Germans, give land back to the Jews. America never did such a thing for Black Americans. What else did America do? When the Claims Conference came along, they gave Jews a homeland and invested billions of dollars into it. They invested billions of dollars in technological enhancement and in military equipment to protect that nation. And then on top of that, they paid them reparations. America's never done any of that for their own people. So while America was fixing up Europe, putting trillions of dollars into them, they never done a thing for the people to whom they've owned trillions of dollars. And that is Black Americans. So I want to say to Mike, You talk about what America's not going to put up with. Let me tell you one thing. If you listen, you motherfucker, Black Americans ain't going to put up with.
No, we're not doing that in here with the language. And the same goes for Mike. As you see, Mike is gone. So I'll let you wrap it up there, but let's not with the language, please.
Thank you. Hey, Marcel, because you for real brought a lot of good information, so I don't want that to be diminished.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. I just want to say, Tendo, Mike was up here saying some incredibly anti-Black things and was never stopped and checked. And I know y'all want to let people speak openly, but there's a difference when someone speak openly and letting this guy go on a full-blown anti-Black rant. And out of respect for your room, Monica, I sat there and I didn't interrupt him. But I want to tell people like him, you don't, like Nina Simone said, you don't tell me, I tell you. Black Americans, what we're not going to put up with is not being paid the debt that this nation owes us. And I also want to call out this lie about the debt. This is something we really need to talk about. America is a monetary sovereign, okay? Just like France, just like the UK, just like Australia. Monetary sovereign refers to federal governments that create their own currency. They have been Republican chairs of Federal Reserves. There have been liberal chairs of the Federal Reserves. Two examples I always mention are Ben Bernanke and Alan Greenspan. They both mention that it is impossible for the United States of America to not pay its bills. It is impossible for the United States of America to run out of money. State governments are financed by taxes, okay? State governments run off of taxes. Federal governments create the currency that goes into circulation in the economy. What federal governments have to concern themselves with is inflation. And inflation can be caused by a variety of factors. Contrary to popular belief, inflation is rarely caused by us putting too much money in the economy. Inflation is usually caused when you get jackasses in charge, like we got right now in the White House, who interrupts the supply lines by doing dumb things like stupid mandates and over-regulating industries to the point where you regulate people out of it. That actually causes inflation more than the latter. But this myth that the federal government cannot pay reparations because it's going to put us into debt, let's talk about that. What we call debt is when we refer to expenditures by the federal government that they don't collect back in taxes. But the thing is that we all know the federal government doesn't need taxes. So what the federal government does with that quote unquote debt is they turn them into U.S. Treasury bonds or yellow dollars. What happens with those yellow dollars? Credit unions buy them, banks buy them, other countries buy them, investors buy them, and the U.S. government pays them interest on those bonds. And that helps to put money into the economy. That's how we can go to banks and get loans. That's how we're able to make these large investments. But at any time the federal government wants, they can turn those yellow dollars into green dollars. And that is something they have done before. It's something they does all the time. We are in a fiat monetary system, which really means it's just numbers on a computer. This debt myth is only really brought up when it's time to do something for Black Americans. No one asks about that when we're spending $20 billion a month on some stupid wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. No one talked about that when Donald Trump sent out 3 stimulus checks. The Republican Party was right there and they signed on to it. The same deficit health. No one talked about that when they doubled the amount of unemployment from 300 to 600 a week. No one talked about that when they put trillions of dollars out there in PPP loans. No one talked about that when they developed these vaccines and they did an education program and they distributed them. No one talks about that when the military gets to spend trillions of dollars outside of their budget just in experiments. The only time we hear about that, oh, and by the way, all that stuff was done under Donald Trump while he did historic tax cuts. And that was something that a lot of conservatives cheered. So how are we worried about that and yet at the same time celebrating tax cuts? The reason they can cheer is because taxes are completely irrelevant to the federal budget. If Trump was able to spend those trillions of dollars while we are at a historic level of tax cuts, we can definitely do that for reparations. The truth be told, we often ask if this country can afford to do reparations. We need to be asking, can it afford not to? And the answer to that is absolutely not.
Okay. Marcel, how's your race going? You running for Congress? Did I lose you?
I wanted to answer some of his questions. Can I?
You absolutely can, Mimi. Yeah, I was just curious as to how his race was going. Let me address something because I'm hearing this from a gentleman on YouTube.
I have to leave and come back. Monica, you bring me up because my phone just went silent.
Yeah, you're good.
Hello?
You're good. Well, yeah, we can hear you now. I think Mimi
I'm
wanted to
go back to listen and come back up. Give me a minute, please.
That's cool. That's cool. That's cool. Listen, so here's the thing. So some of you guys are offended that I let people go on. And what's interesting is that I'm getting it